We're excited to talk about ChatGPT. I guess everybody's just talking about ChatGPT nowadays. So I think we'll start the discussion with I know a lot of you, probably all of you, understand what ChatGPT is, what it does, but for some of you who don't really understand, so a very high level ChatGPT is an AI powered chat bot, and where GPT stands for generative pre-trained transformer, which is a machine learning model trained on 175 billion machine learning parameters, and this has never happened before. So it's one of a kind. It was developed and launched by an American company, OpenAI, in December last year. It uses NLP, reinforced by learning techniques, language translation, language modeling. And in simple terms, ChatGPT is an AI chatbot that creates content, that has a capability of understanding and generating text, and it responds to questions with the nuances of human interaction.
I mean, yeah, and just to expand on that, I think some really quick facts, really unprecedented. I think these figures are staggering, actually. 1 million users within the first week of launch. It's been just over 2 months, a little over 2 months, and it has already reached 100 million users, receiving approximately 10 million prompts a day. We all have heard about the huge investment that Microsoft has made, $10 billion in ChatGPT. And coincidentally, just today, I came across an article about Microsoft releasing or launching Bing, and they have integrated OpenAI's GPT-4 with Bing. And so that should really help Microsoft sort of climb up the revenue ladder compared to Google.
Yeah, and absolutely. I think we're just entering into this amazing race there, Maida, the race of AI chatbots, because very interestingly, Google is set to announce, I think in an hour from now, in an AI project in Paris today, which is called Bard, which is an AI chatbot, which is very similar to ChatGPT, but it's a language model that uses dialogue application, which we call Lambda. So really interesting times, and there's quite. I mean, as we get to know these AI chatbots better, maybe you could have another conversation on Bard. We still don't know much about it because it hasn't been released to the public. So why don't we start? I think Jessica, maybe having some technical difficulty. I can't see her here, but Henry, can you hear us?
Either.
I can hear you now. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, perfect. All right. Good to have you here. Why don't we start, Henry, do you mind? Just give us an introduction. Please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Henry. I'm a director at Somex. We're a health tech and biotech specific communications agency. Background-wise, I trained as a journalist and have done various other things, but mostly commercial stuff involving the NHS and selling SaaS products into it before moving into a comms role. I also write Health Tech Pigeon, which is Somex's weekly health tech newsletter, and spend far too much time on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Don't we all? But especially with this exploding news one after the other, I can't seem to catch up actually. So let's start. So I think let's just start with, I'll ask my guest questions about, so have you used ChatGPT and what was your experience like? Henry, what about you? Why don't we start with you?
Yeah, I've definitely used it a fair amount. I think my experience initially was colored by the number of people that I saw posting about it who were convinced that this was the end of marketing, the end of SEO, the end of creativity. And I've found it to be a reasonably useful tool, but not necessarily the doomsday kind of prediction that everyone thinks it is. I think it is a great creator of prompts. I think it's a great way to start doing something if you feel a creative block. And it's also, there are huge potential applications in health tech, in healthcare, particularly around things like care for the elderly, seniors, and the ability to feel like there is another person communicating with you. But I would say my experiences so far have been mixed generally.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Maida, what do you think?
Yeah, so I want to ask Henry in reference to his last LinkedIn post. Are you going to eat your hat, Henry?
So I'm not, sadly. No, I'm going to be away.
You're going to be away. All right. Well, I mean, if people obviously don't know what we're talking about, you can head on to Henry's profile and check out his recent LinkedIn post. But coming back to your question, Dr. Fazine, I think I have used ChatGPT mostly I've used it for different types of content. So I've tried it for articles, social media, and in my experience, I've found that it's better suited for commercial content, maybe for superficial content, not so much for expert driven or something that denotes thought leadership, and definitely not opinionated. So I've one thing that I've noticed about the content that's generated by ChatGPT is that it's not opinionated. It's very neutral, which I think is a good thing in a way. But yeah, like what Henry said, I think that it just sort of gives you maybe a head start. And yeah, in that case, I think it's pretty good for commercial purposes.
I think the
Yeah,
the key with
go ahead, Henry. Yeah.
I was going to say the key with giving it personality and things like that is that, as with any data model, any AI tool, you largely get out what you put in terms of personality. So ChatGPT is great at pretending to be someone, pretending to ape a personality, to take on a persona. But where it's being used poorly, people asking it generic queries. Give me 10 ways in which I can change a toxic workplace, that kind of thing. It will just produce generic content. Whereas if you ask it to do that in the style of, let's say, the style of a management consultant, or in the style of a wellness guru, it will give you slightly more personality. It is still learning how to be less robotic, but
Yeah.
it can do those things. It just, at the moment, the quality of a lot of the prompts that go into it are low, and that means the content quality it puts out is very low.
Valid point. Valid point. But I have to ask, I mean, why do you think it became so big so fast? Considering that there are other AI tools that generate content, and some of them are pretty decent. Do you think it's because of its human-like responses, or its sort of impressive interpretations, Dr. Tazeen and Henry? I'd like to know your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think, adding to Henry's point about what's the experience like with it, I think that we have to understand that there's a difference between information and knowledge. So yes, ChatGPT is an amazing tool to give you information. Now, if that is that information accurate, clinically validated, factual, is something that obviously it's the onus is on the user to fact check it. But in terms of producing information and giving information in real time, I think it's doing a brilliant job. And to answer the question, Maida, why is it so big? I guess Chat GPT really feeds into our impatient nature. We humans, we always want things right there within seconds. And I think Chat GPT just fulfills our desire to do more with less effort and in less time. And its ability to have a conversation and give information which is more natural and intuitive, and especially in the form of answers. I think it really sets this chatbot apart from the rest of the AI content producing tools that have been in the market for years now. I think it's this fact that it gives you information and it answers a question that you're asking is what I think is that really pulls the people towards it. What do you think, Henry?
So I think there's a couple of things. Firstly, we're all told, and particularly working in communications, we're often told that building brand, building personal brand is important, and that with social tools like LinkedIn, social media like LinkedIn, I should say, that consistency is key. I think the ability of ChatGPT to instantly produce content for people, whether that is social media posts, blogs, even white papers, that kind of thing, essay answers, is naturally appealing to people's, I don't want to say laziness, but inherently, as you say, puts us into people's desire to take a shortcut to things, to get something done quickly because time is precious. I think the reason we saw it explode so rapidly was that it's able to do that bit for you. It's just not yet able to do it very well. I have seen
True.
multiple people called out for just reposting ChatGPT content recently on social media, which I think is a good thing. I think it's incumbent on anyone who is interested in good impressive, interesting, inspiring content and communication to note when people are doing it, because it is lazy and it is a good shortcut. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a bad thing. There's a great starting point for a lot of things. If you are, as I said earlier, feeling uninspired, blocked, feeling like you don't know where you want to start with a point that you know you want to make, it's a great tool to start you off. And I think that's why
No,
it's been so popular.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad to welcome our second guest, Jessica. Good to have you here, Jessica.
Hi. Sorry it took me a while, but I'm in.
It's all right. We all have been in this phase where we can't figure out how to handle the technology. So, Jessica, I'm going to then ask you this question that I know, as I was saying earlier, there have been AI-driven tools that were creating content. And first, I want you to know, why do you think ChatGPT is better or worse in your opinion? And how does it fare against the other AI tools that you might have used in your line of work?
Good question. I think we've seen this massive proliferation of AI tools that claim to be versions of Chat GPT or the like. And I think what I've noticed so far is that with Chat GPT, it really, if you prompt it in the right way and you can give this thing so much context. I'll give you an example. Recently, I did a massive data dump. I exported about 5 different spreadsheets of data from Google Analytics, and it just looked like gobbledygook, loads of numbers. It wasn't in a very ordered format, and I just dumped it in Chat GPT. And I asked it to make sense of the data, and it did. It gave me something back that was a really logical answer based on common sense and that made sense in relation to that data. And I think no other tool that I've tried is able to do that, is able to interpret data in a way that makes sense, in logical kind of intellectual way. And I think for me, I've had a few subscriptions to different tools, and I don't necessarily want to name them because I don't, a lot of these tools were kind of made it very clear that they were still testing things. And so, I've stopped a lot of my subscriptions because I didn't feel like it was worth what I was paying for what I was getting back. So I think the obvious one with Chat GPT as well is it's free, right? Anyone can use it. And I think that model, the way they've started that, has been a real advantage because the more people using it, the more intelligent it gets. And I think that's how it's been able to develop so quickly.
No, absolutely.
No, excellent points. Excellent points, Jessica. And I think I have used one or two other AI tools, and the significant difference that I've seen with one of the other tools, and again, I'm not going to name it, but I did prompt an AI tool to extract specific data or specific like statistics about a certain topic. And what it did was, and I really liked this, was that it gave me a list of references and clickable references. So there were like a link of references that I could, add to my work, which I don't see with ChatGPT. So I think this was a good addition or a good feature, and maybe they can incorporate it into a ChatGPT. But again, Jessica, we're so glad to have you. I'm glad you could join, and I'm just wondering because now people are comparing ChatGPT to Google all the time. I can see why, but I also I believe that it's sort of like comparing apples and oranges because Google is a search engine, whereas excuse me, ChatGPT is an LLM. And so, how do you think it's going to affect SEO practices and Google ranking?
Oh, that is a good question, and one that really excites me. So, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to have a look, but Bing have now integrated, well, they're working with OpenAI actually on they've integrated AI with search, with Bing search at the moment.
Yes.
We're definitely
ChatGPT 4, they're saying.
Yeah, exactly. I would say go and have a play with that. But it's a difficult one because I think on the one hand, the concern is what will be our incentive as SEOs to create content? Because ultimately, what we're doing is we're trying to get traffic to our clients' websites, right, on a really basic level so that they can eventually become customers. I mean, that's the ultimate thing, or buy a product or a service. And what is the incentive for us to create content if a lot of searches are going to result in 0 clicks. And I think that is where the concern is coming from for SEOs is, you're taking away what is ultimately our USP is that, hey, we can bring you traffic. But I think it's a bit premature. So in my view, the way it will change SEO for now and in the kind of short-term future is that we have to separate certain queries and types of content instead of blanketly saying, oh yeah, but ChatGPT is not intelligent, doesn't have emotional intelligence, it's not sentient. We know all of these things. We know that if we give it a generic question, it will give us a generic answer. We know that it regurgitates things. And I think we have to get more nuanced with the debates we're having at the moment, which is more that actually some queries can be answered without nuance and without the emotional input. If I type into Google, how do I bleed a radiator? I don't need 10 different variations of content written by humans with emotion to answer that question for me. I'm totally happy to have that answered right away at the top of search without clicking anywhere. And so those types of searches make sense. It makes sense to have that answer super quickly. But then there might be more nuanced questions like, and I'm going to talk about personally because I've had mental health struggles in the past. I might be looking at what is the best type of therapy for anxiety? What has the most evidence to support this kind of therapy being, legitimate and etc. Those types of things you'd want to really delve into deeper and understand where the sources are coming from, who said this, is it a qualified, is it a qualified therapist, doctor, etc.
Yes.
And I think it's differentiating types of content as to what needs a more qualitative response, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's true because, as we say, it gives information, but is that information correct? And that's where the concerns come in when you talk about, as you said, information about mental health or information about any medical content or health related content. And then I would come to you, Henry. So, I mean, there has been a debate on the ethical issues surrounding the use of ChatGPT in healthcare. And what do you see? What do you think are the credible concerns that people have, and what are your concerns? And do you feel that as this model trains, we understand that ChatGPT 3 is going to evolve and give better responses, but what challenges do you see and opportunities do you see in terms of it's creating content for healthcare professionals?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that has been very, very prevalent recently. The issue comes back to what we talked about before, what I mentioned before, which is the model is only as good as what goes into it and how it's asked to produce an answer. Where ChatGPT is using a vast data set, you have an issue that there is conflicting advice and conflicting information on healthcare online. Some of that published by reputable journals, Nature, etc. Some published by medical professionals, some published by people who may not have the requisite credentials to be giving out medical advice. So the big concern at the moment is that ChatGPT almost knows too much, and that much of what it knows is not necessarily relevant. I think where there are applications for ChatGPT, can't say it properly today, ChatGPT in things like care for the elderly and other areas, for healthcare reasons, or healthcare instances, I think something more like BioGPT, which is something that Microsoft has been working on.
Yeah, yeah.
Use, because it uses domain-specific data, right? So it will look at PubMed, which is the huge database of biomed articles, which I think they're using a database from pre-2022, 2021, something like that, which is like 15, 20 million pieces of content. Now, again, healthcare research does not always agree with itself, but at least those are validated data sources. They've been peer reviewed, and therefore the information that is spitting out is a much better bet for healthcare related AI generated content than ChatGPT at this point.
True. And not
No,
only are they
absolutely.
peer reviewed, and not only are they peer reviewed, sorry, Maida, I wanted to add something. We also know the credibility of the authors. Again, a limitation and a debate around ChatGPT is if you ask a question, for example, a person asks a question, let's say a patient looking for answers, a quick answers, a symptom maybe, or the prognosis of a disease he's been diagnosed with. Now, he'll get an immediate response, but he doesn't know who said it. And is it factually correct? And I think as humans, we tend to kind of believe the first piece of information we get. So I understand, the apprehensions that people have surrounding the use of ChatGPT in the medical field, and especially in asking questions about health-related questions where you don't understand, where you don't know the answer is coming from who, because ChatGPT is not giving you links or does not give links to research that is basing the answer on. So I think that is one challenge that I see. But then again, we could always or argue, and I think a lot of people here would have seen that tweet of a doctor who was actually creating letters to the insurance agency who rejected the claims of his patients. And he was creating, letters within minutes. And those are the kind of administrative tasks I feel that the doctors still have to do. Those really can be helped at a good starting point. But how much can we rely on it? It's still, we still have to see how it gets better and better. And definitely BioGPT will definitely have more in terms
Yeah.
of healthcare content.
I just wanted to add a point on BioGPT. I think even though BioGPT is based on GPT-3, but it's at a much smaller scale, and it's pre-trained. It's not only pre-trained on a specific domain, but then it's fine-tuned as well. And so that really goes to show that we can use a smaller scale language model, but if it is based on specific domain data, it just provides more accurate. It generates more accurate results. And I think in healthcare, especially, that is going to be more beneficial than something, say, like ChatGPT, which is very general and might not have relevant responses to healthcare prompts. So I'm looking forward to how BioGPT can actually contribute to health content. But Dr. Tazeen, she mentioned a use case, and I'm wondering for both of you, Henry and Jessica, are there any exciting or interesting use cases that you guys came across with ChatGPT?
So this hasn't been published yet, but it's a conversation I've been having with a couple of people about the use of GPT in triage, which I think could be hugely beneficial. So in the UK, something like 30% of GP appointments shouldn't be GP appointments.
True.
They should go to other types of staff, whether that's a pharmacist or a social prescriber or physiotherapist, MSK, nurse, whoever it is. And at the moment, our triage system is, it's difficult to say, but I would probably say the way that triage works in the UK is inadequate. You've got 111, you have systems like eConsult. I used to work at eConsult, and it does an amazing job for what it's meant to do. But the ability to use a large language model that can cross-reference lots of validated and peer-reviewed studies to effectively point people in the right direction for their condition and relieve the burden on primary care and therefore secondary care eventually in the UK is a potentially incredibly exciting thing, because you can go to NHS 111's version of ChatGPT, put in your symptoms and know that you're getting validated medical advice that says, actually, you don't need to see your GP. What you've got is likely a stomach bug, or what you've got could likely be sorted by visiting your physiotherapist via your GP. Here's how you book in. That is an incredibly exciting way in which you can use AI to make sure that the burden on health services, not just in the NHS, but globally, is diverted in the right way. I think that's the thing that is exciting me the most at the moment.
Yeah, I would have to completely echo you on that, Henry. I think in a similar way, in the SEO industry, in the content creation side of things, there is this kind of issue that I've come across when I've been working with clients in the kind of healthcare sector around, we'll create a piece of content, and ultimately if we make a claim or any type of claim, really, it can be financial sector as well, we're kind of limited to what the writer of that content is able to access within a reasonable amount of time. So they might do a Google search for a couple of studies, and they might I think anyone in actually in the medical sector listening to this might have a bit of a bit of a meltdown hearing it, but that's the reality of it. You know, you have a writer who might come up, find 2 or 3 studies and then quote them in the article, right? And we know that, you know, I'm not a healthcare expert, but we know that that's looking at maybe 0.001% of the studies that have been done on that particular issue or claim. So what I see the potential for is something that can quickly access hundreds of thousands of studies and peer-reviewed journals, where any type of claim being made in a piece of content is easily checked against that data very quickly. And, you know, I think there's an issue at the moment where it's kind of a running joke, isn't it? Don't Google your symptoms because it's going to tell you you're going to die, which tells you we have a problem, right? Because if people are afraid to search things because they're terrified of what's going to come up, that tells you that we've got an issue. And I think the potential for AI to actually solve that and kind of lessen that anxiety when searching for something that you're dealing with is going to be massive.
I think, and a tangent to that, which is also important, that feeds off of your point earlier on, Jessica, about the ability to make sense of massive data sets. There is so much peer-reviewed research out there, and it would be impossible is a difficult word to use, but I think it would be impossible for anything pre-ChatGPT to go through all of the research that exists in, say, cardiovascular health, look at all of the data, analyze it, and see the things that humans have missed. Because you could be the country's top cardiovascular expert, but you're not going to be able to read all of the literature that comes out. Whereas a machine learning model can look at all of that data, find patterns, which is what MLMs are good at, find the patterns, and that could lead to huge health breakthroughs. That's an incredibly exciting concept.
It is,
Absolutely. And I
and
think
it
that's
just, I'd like to reinforce the importance of just having diverse data sets now. I think more, I know we're talking about health equities, and this is sort of going on a tangent here, but I think that if now we have tools that can analyze like large data sets and you know, give their predictive analyses, I think that it's so much more important, and this is a real opportunity for researchers to include and incorporate diverse data sets in their researches. Yeah, I think Dr. Zine, were you saying something?
Yeah, that's all right. So I was just saying that this is the same models that we're using in primary care, where it's not humanly possible to go through pages and pages of patient history and create a pattern, but the ML, the machine learning algorithms, can do that within seconds, and that's exactly why they can be so helpful in healthcare.
Yeah, I think the issue there is always going to be, you know, there are 4 pillars to medical ethics, right? Beneficence, so doing good; non-maleficence, not doing any harm; autonomy, giving the patient kind of the freedom to choose; and justice, like ensuring fairness. And where I think the challenge is going to be to effectively using ChatGPT and other AI tools is going to be ensuring that ethics are hard coded into them, and it's not just saying black and white, this is what the data says, which is the difference, I suppose, between being treated by a database and being treated by a doctor.
Absolutely.
No, absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think,
I think another
you know,
debate,
it's been,
another debate that we've
yeah.
had. Sorry, Maida. I think we wanted to discuss this topic, and since you both are in the content creating industry and you create content yourself as well, and there's a big debate on how it's going to change the industry. Are we looking at people losing their jobs? So, how do you think, in your line of work, people should evolve the way they work and function, and augmented and using these technological advances like ChatGPT, Bard, and all the others that will come after this?
After you, Jessica.
It's an interesting question. I think in the kind of content creation SEO side of things, we have to be very adaptable and open to change. You know, Google's constantly releasing algorithm updates which change the way that we work. And I suppose one that really comes into mind when in this particular discussion is EAT, which is EEAT now, which is experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness. So for those listening that, you know, aren't SEOs, it basically, in a nutshell, When we talk about things related to your money or your life, so anything that can have an impact on somebody's overall, medical or mental well-being or their financial well-being, the Google algorithm is really trying to scrutinize who is writing that content, who is publishing it, where the sources come from, etc. And I think even more so, that's going to be important. And I think we'll just have to adapt and understand which types of queries people will still click through and read a blog about. And when we get the data, when we understand more about this stuff, because ultimately Google will release that. It will, it will tell us how many searches result in 0 clicks, i.e., where they found their answer within the actual Google page itself. And we just have to adapt and try and create content that is high quality, it comes from an authoritative source, it's trusted. And in my opinion, that's going to be a big shift. Quality content, long form content, and a lot more detailed.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think when it comes to, sorry, Henry, were you saying something?
No, you go on.
No, I was just saying, when I'm just going to expand on the quality part. I think I was just talking about this to someone earlier, and I think that quality content has never been more important than it is now. Google has tools that can identify content that is generated by AI, but then again, that's poor quality content. And I think now more than ever, it's about meaningful and quality content, definitely. Would you like to add something, Henry?
We're saying something. Yep.
Yeah. So I think the original question was, how will this affect, content creation? And
yeah,
I think there are broadly speaking 3 areas where it will: creativity, efficiency, and authenticity. So the purpose of content, right, is there are meant to be 4 purposes to content, right? To either entertain, inspire, educate, or convince. Convince, if you can entertain, inspire, or educate, is largely superfluous, because if your content is doing the first 3, then you will convince people to act in the way you want, by which I mean to purchase a product or service or do whatever it is that you need them to do. ChatGPT can't, at the moment, the content that you get out of it, however good your prompts are, is not something that is going to inspire or entertain. Educate, yes, it is amazing at trawling through large data sets and coming up with reasonably salient points. It is not there as an entertaining tool. I don't know if you've tried to get it to write anything pithy or funny in any way. It falls down. It is not something that is there to inspire, because that is a very human thing. And I think that one of the things that disappointed me when ChatGPT first launched was the number of people who were like, well, this is the death of the creative industry. This is the death of people who create different content, because it's not. Creativity is one of the very few things that makes us totally unique from animals. You have animals that can solve problems. Crows can solve problems. Dolphins play to a certain extent, but we're the only species that I know of that creates art, and words are art, and it's incredibly important for that to be front and center of anyone's conversations when we're talking about creativity and ChatGPT, because it's not creating something that is meaningful or entertaining or inspiring. It is creating words, and words without sort of feeling behind them are just words. There's no
emotion.
There's no emotion.
And again, it's just regurgitates information, right? I mean, it just gives out information that it's been fed. And again, I mean, I was also discussing this with Maida as well. And when we were talking, when people started saying, oh, it's going to make jobs redundant, we will not need content writer, which are humans anymore. And I think that's not true, because the information that it gives you, sometimes you can actually easily tell if a person wrote it, or ChatGPT or any other AI generated tool wrote it, because it somehow does not have, the words don't have that connection. And I completely agree, Henry, here that yes, it's not creative. The creators didn't say it's creative. They say it's just built on large language models, and it just regurgitates information when you ask a prompt. And it's information that it gives out is also as good as the prompt you give it. In fact, we've seen a lot of examples of how different prompts could lead to very different answers. So it's a tool like any other technology that we debate. I think we've debated enough that if the machines are going to take over the jobs of doctors. But again, I think for content creators today, it's a tool. Yes, it's efficient. It is a good starting point, but I don't really think it can be creative. No, I absolutely agree, Henry.
And I just want to actually caveat here as well that one thing that a lot of people in the SEO industry in particular have kind of missed is that Google has never said that AI created content is against the rules, or that it will punish or penalize content generated by AI. That's not the case. The case is more that any content that is created for the algorithm, so for the Google algorithm, whether it's written by a human or ChatGPT, will not rank well. So there is not only an issue with ChatGPT not being creative, but actually for a long time now in the SEO industry, we've had content that is not creative, and it's been written by humans, but it's just because it's been written to target certain keywords. So it sounds robotic, it's keyword stuffed. So I don't necessarily think it's this kind of new issue that ChatGPT is presenting in the sense of creating content that's unoriginal or uninspiring, because there's millions of blog posts out there that are unoriginal and uninspiring, and they're written by people. And I'm not necessarily criticizing the writer themselves, but more how Google didn't evolve so quickly. And so what happened naturally, and I was one of those people back in the day, I've been in SEO for 10 years. So at the beginning, yeah, I was definitely writing content that was keyword stuffed, trying to play the algorithm. But that's almost been like a cleanup operation happening ever since. So I think, it might be the case that it's a lot quicker to create unoriginal content, but it's not necessarily a new issue that search engines have come across.
That's also there's also a problem there, I think, Jessica, about how we incentivize people who work in SEO and how we set KPIs and targets for them. Where people are targeted on certain click-through rates and things like that, there is an inherent incentive to maximize, the number of people who are clicking onto something
100%.
by appealing to the algorithms that we're all beholden to a certain extent. And I think that where we often try at Somex to educate our clients is to say, we can write you blogs that get hundreds, thousands of people reading them. We can write you white papers that do the same. But if the people reading them aren't the people you need to read them, that's largely an exercise in vanity metrics. Like, we can get you posts that get 600, 700, 800 likes, but if none of those 800 people can purchase your services, then what's the point? So there is always going to be a niche for really targeted, tailored, well-written content that informs the right people. And that's not something I think AI in its current guises can ever take away.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I think that's such an important point and such a good note to sort of end our discussion. I think it was such a productive discussion, insightful discussion, and I'd really like to open the floor for some Q&A. I'm just going to see. I saw a couple of people who raised their virtual hands.